Does it feel good just to take a breath and relax? It's Sabbath. Just enjoy it. It's been a week, hasn't it? Long week with those hurricanes and everything going on. A lot to pray for. A lot to be thankful for. So, tonight, I want to welcome all of you. I'm glad you're here to enjoy this presentation from Dr. Don Hall. And Kurt's going to introduce him here in a moment, but just to kind of give you an orientation where we're heading, we have tonight's meeting at 7 o'clock. And then tomorrow morning, as part of kind of our regular service, Don will also be presenting a presentation at that time, at actually probably starting around 11:30. And then in the afternoon, at 1:30, we'll have a final presentation, and lunch will be provided. So if you want to come and catch the morning and the afternoon, the lunch will be there, it'll be provided for you. And if you need a restroom, they're outside to the right. And there was one other thing I was going to say, but old age just caught up with me, so I think we're going to have a short prayer, and let's get right to it. Father in heaven, we are so grateful for your blessings in our lives, the blessings of health and strength that you've bestowed upon us. Lord, we want to cooperate with you. We want to improve the gifts that you've given us of health and strength. And so, Lord, to that end, we pray that you'll be with us tonight and through the weekend. In Jesus' name, amen. I remembered it. After 1:30 tomorrow, we will continue with a weekly program that is 8 weeks long. You'll hear more about that throughout these presentations, but we will have a follow-up starting next week at 4 o'clock with a 1 hour, approximately 1 day a week, weekly program. So, looking forward to that as well. Lots of things happening. Kurt, tell us who Don Hall is. Oh, there he is. He's right in front of us.
You know what? I would like to invite people to move forward a little bit. Maybe we can do at least the first half of it here so Don doesn't feel so alone up here. So if we could get some of you to move on up a little bit, we'd like to fill about the first half of it here as we kind of make this. He says he's a very casual person, so he will take questions as well as, but tonight I think we'll probably do a presentation and then we'll do some Q&A afterwards that you can do. And there will be some handouts available for that as well. So, but hey, let's find out who you are. So I think your mic is on.
Yes.
Now, I understand you graduated from Loma Linda University in 1973.
I enjoyed it so much I did it twice.
You did it twice. And what was that you did?
The first time was a Master's in Public Health, Nutrition.
Okay.
And that was in 1973. And then the Doctor of Health Science program with a major in preventive care. And that was in 1978.
So preventive care was kind of a new concept back then. Is that correct?
It is, and it's still a new concept today. Most people don't go and see a doctor until something hurts.
Yes, right.
And the concept of preventive care is what can you do ahead of time to prevent it from hurting.
Okay.
And you'll find out today and through this weekend, there's so much we can do to prevent disease.
Yes.
That's always better to prevent it if you can.
That's what we're here for. As I said before, you know, we want to die young as late as possible. So we want to feel young until we're no longer here. And that's what you're going to help us with this weekend. Is that correct?
I like that idea.
Yes. Okay, so you did studies here. You also, I understand that you started doing health assessments. Is that kind of where your career took?
Yeah, I found how do you get people interested in their health? And we found that one of the best ways is to give an assessment. Okay. For example, when we were doing this up in northern Washington, we went to a university. We put a little sign out and said, free stress inventory. This was just before they started taking their exams. And you know, we had several people to help, And just in one afternoon, we did several hundred students that came by.
Wow.
And then after they take the assessment and they see how they're doing, then you begin to talk to them about things that you would never have the opportunity to do otherwise. You know, it's hard to come up to somebody on the street and say, you know, I'd like to talk to you about your weight.
Yeah. Right.
Or your mental health.
Yeah.
But after they've taken an assessment and the program suggests, you know, some things, and you ask them how they're doing, and you can get into some very good conversations about their health. And so we found it as a great way. How do you get people interested? You ask people if they're healthy or not, and what do they say?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. But then you put them on the treadmill and you pinch their fat and we see what the percent body fat is, and you do some strength tests and some other kinds of things, and then you compare them to national norms, and then people begin to get a reality picture, and the light begins to go on up there and say, well, you know, I probably do need to make some improvements.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so it also then establishes a baseline so we can come back a few months from now and show what improvement they've done. And that's always very encouraging to show how they've made changes, that's improved their health, and it's a good formula for getting people to change.
And then I understand that kind of as computers were kind of becoming popular, then you put the assessment online, and you were part of the Time Magazine's computer that moves, right? That moves in.
Do you remember the time that they made the Man of the Year, the computer? Well,
tell us about how you were involved with that.
Computers was the new thing, you know, at that time.
Correct.
And they had computer people who were doing things on finance and managing people and all those kinds of things, but they didn't have anything on computer and health. And we had all kinds of nutritional assessments and stress inventories and fitness profiles and all these kinds of things. And they became interested in that. So they sent a man out, spent all day, took probably 1,000 pictures, and featured that as one of the features in the magazine, Man of the Year.
Part of the Man of the Year being the computer, and you were the part that was on the health side.
And if you see those pictures today, you probably won't recognize me because I had a full beard, and I look a lot different.
Yeah,
and a white coat.
And a white coat, yes. Then you developed a corporate wellness program. Is that how it went from there? And what was the name of that? And what kind of organizations did you, work with?
We did. I started at first at Portland Adventist Medical Center for executive health fitness evaluations. And the top businessmen in the country wanted to come in and have the most thorough health and lifestyle assessment they could have. And we provided that, and it was very popular. And then companies said, we'd like to do that for our organization. So we went out to Tektronix, which was the largest employer in Oregon at that time, did all of their managers in their company, and they made marvelous changes. It was exciting to see it. The general manager lost 20 pounds, he stopped smoking, he went from doing no exercise to exercising regularly. It was fun to see those changes in those people's lives. And then, of course, they did a good job, and so someone else would say, well, we'd like to do it at our company. So we started a program at Nike Corporation. We did one for Intel, and we did one for all the big companies in the Northwest there. And people were excited about it. The word spread. And pretty soon people nationwide said, we'd like to do it in Florida. We'd like to do it in Washington, D.C., and different places. And so then we started it on a national basis.
And when did the name WellSource?
1983.
Okay. So that was your corporate wellness
program that went nationwide.
Right. And of course, the benefit of that is what for the organization of the company?
Well, if your employees are sick and not on the job,
right,
that's not a good thing, is it? And one of the first ones we did was at a hospital, an Adventist hospital. And I thought, what can we tell doctors and nurses and Adventists about health? They already know everything about health. But when we begin to test them and put them on the treadmill and test their bloods and look at their cholesterol levels and pinch their body fat and so on, they begin to see they needed some changes too. And so at the end of that year, we divided half the employees on the program and the other half weren't. And then we looked at their work loss time. And those who weren't in the wellness program had twice as many hours, exactly twice as many hours of work loss as those in the wellness program.
Wow.
Well, if a nurse can't come to work, what do you have to do?
Right.
You have to hire someone else to take their place, don't you? So it's expensive.
Yeah. So, but it's a win-win then for the company, their corporation,
It
and
is.
for the individual.
If their employees are healthy and well, they're more productive, they cost less, and who wants a key employee to die early?
And the benefit to the individual as well, because they
their own
are
benefit.
They are feeling good longer.
That's
and
right.
That kind of thing. And then I'm guessing that it reduces healthcare costs overall for the organization.
It does. And when we compared those two groups at the hospital that first time, those in the wellness group had $600 per person less medical claims for the year. Well, you multiply that out, you have 12,000 employees, 1,200 employees, excuse me. That makes a big difference. It gets into the parts of $1 million.
Wow.
And so we found that for every dollar we invested in the health and a wellness program, the company made $6.
Wow.
So we gave half of that back to the employees as an incentive.
Yes, right, working with them. Very good, very cool. That's exciting. That is exciting to hear what you have done. And the benefit is not only for the company, it's for the individual in the long term, because they're going to retire and move on, and they're going to have good health. And that's the benefit of that. So tonight we're going to focus on fitness,
exercise.
And then tomorrow morning at 11, it will be...
We're going to take an amazing study that took a group of about 123,000 people, followed them for about 34 years, looked at their health practices, and saw who lived and who died, and how much longer they lived if they had certain health practices. It's probably the best longevity study that's ever been done. And we will show you the things that's most important to increase your life expectancy, to decrease your risk of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, all these things, by amazing numbers.
So you think that by certain health practices, I can reduce to eliminate the possibility of cancer?
In that study, they showed that it reduced the risk by about 40%.
Okay.
Almost half, cut it in half. And these are just simple things we can do in our lifestyle.
Right. Excellent. Okay, so then that's at 11 o'clock, and then at 1:30, we're going to talk about what?
Then we're going to jump into nutrition. And that's one of my favorite subjects, because I have a master's in it. I've spent a lot of time reading and studying about it. And again, we're going to take that same study, and they did an assessment on the people. They found 10 factors that nutritional practices that all were related to longevity. Every one that they practiced, it increased their longevity.
Yeah.
So you're going to find ways to add years to your life by eating more healthfully.
So I asked him, I said, okay, is exercise more important than diet? And your response was, yes.
Right. In most cases, most likely. You know, Adventists, we probably eat better than the average population. But I don't know that we're more active, physically active.
Yeah.
And so that's one area that I've kind of focused on a lot, is to things we can do to encourage people to be more active.
Okay. So all the presentations that you're going to do this weekend are just out of your head, right? Thoughts that you've had, right? Or are these science-based programs?
There's a term we use, it's called evidence-based medicine or evidence-based health.
Okay.
And so you will probably get tired of seeing all my charts and graphs, but we want to show you the actual evidence and the results of these large studies, and we'll put it into a simple graph on a screen, and you can look at it and make your own conclusions. And we'll ask you to be the doctors. If this is the results of the studies, what would you recommend to the people that you treated? And so that way you can see that it's not just somebody's idea,
right,
but it's actual evidence and research that's been
So that's kind of what
published.
Your life has been about, showing the evidences for certain preventative health ways that you can do in your life, preventative ways.
That's right. And as a church, we have been blessed by having insights on how to live healthfully for
Correct.
over 100, 150 years, haven't we?
Right.
And so we'll bring out a few of those key principles, and we'll show the research that's being done today, how it amplifies and shows that what we've been teaching is the right thing.
Good. Okay, we're going to let you go ahead and present tonight, and then we'll have some Q&A afterwards for the questions. So thank you.
Okay, let me see if I can get this turned on here. Okay, I think it's green, so I think I'm in good shape. Well, it's good to be here with you, and it's good to see some old friends from school days. Glad you could be here too. And we're just going to be talking about ways to keep our bodies in good health. And I'm supposed to stand back here so I'm in the light, because they're going to try to put it on the internet tonight, I heard. So first of all, I'd just like to take a few thoughts. As Christians, why is it important, or is it important for us to take good care of our health? And we'll just look at a few key ideas, and then we'll get into more of the specifics, some of the scientific research. I think the first concept is, who made us? God made us. He created us, didn't he? Created these wonderful bodies. And if he was kind enough and took time enough to create our bodies, we should be able to try to do the best we can and take good care of them. Does that make sense? Okay. And I like this verse from Psalms. It says, I will praise you, for I am what? Fearfully and wonderfully made. And it's been my joy in life to study the human body, and I'm always amazed at the Creator's work and the way he built our physiology and how we work, and it's so complex and very fascinating to study human life. Here's another thought from Ellen White's writings. It talks about God wants us to develop our abilities. And it says, our second duty, is that right? Oh no, it's first duty, excuse me. Our first duty toward God and our fellow being is that of what? Self-development. Isn't that an interesting thought? Every faculty with which the Creator has endowed us should be cultivated to the highest degree of perfection. Hence, that time is spent to good account, which is used in the establishment and preservation of physical and mental health. Does that make good sense? You see, God wants us to use our bodies and our talents and our everything that He has created for us to the highest ability so that we can be of best service to other people in our lives. Now, God has certain laws of life. We know about some of them, like the law of gravity. If you step off a cliff, what's going to happen? You may think you can float, but you'll always fall, won't you? So there's certain laws of life, laws in the natural world. There's laws that God has given us for the moral conduct and how we treat our relationship to Him and to our fellow man, the Ten Commandments. He's also given laws in our bodies. So first of all is the written word. That's where we can find God's laws in the Bible and inspired writings. In fact, God Himself, in the Ten Commandments, we're told He wrote it with His own finger in stone. Pretty important, isn't it? But it's also written the natural laws of life in our own bodies. It says God's law is written by His own finger upon every nerve, every muscle, every faculty which has been entrusted to man. So when we study the human body and how it's made and the physiology and how it works and so on, that's just as important or just as divine as the laws He wrote with His finger in stone. It's the same God, same principles of life, and if we come into harmony with those principles, what's the result? It's a blessing, isn't it? And we'll look at some of the blessings as we come into harmony with those. So we're going to look at physical activity tonight, and there's a big book, I guess you could say, or published on the web for Americans. It's called Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans. I don't know if you've read them or not. It's very interesting to those who are into fitness. And it starts out by making this statement: physical activity is key to improving the health of the nation. If you were to take one thing and improve the health of a nation, what do you suppose it would be? Well, these people have suggested that physical activity, if we were all physically active and had good fitness levels, it would improve our health as a nation more than perhaps any other one thing we can do. We can also read what Ellen White wrote about this over 100 years ago. Proper periods of sleep and rest, and how much? An abundance of physical exercise are essential to health of body and the mind. And so I think that was good guidance given many, many years ago, and we put that into practice. An abundance of physical activity has great rewards, and we'll look at that as we get into the studies. Now the problem, of course, is inactivity. And as we look here, it says 1 in 4 Americans get no regular exercise. They don't do anything. That's a fourth of the nation. And the other 3/4 do some activity, but it says only 1 in 5, or 20% of Americans, get the minimal amount of recommended activity. So as a nation, we're fairly inactive. In other words, there's a lot of room for improvement there, hasn't it? So, I think I went too fast there. Here's a little study that was done that illustrates that. And I'm going to have several graphs. And if you look on the left side of the graph, you'll see the chart going up, usually from 0 to 1. This is a way of, it's called relative risk, of comparing different groups of people. And in this case, it's the hours of sitting daily. Now notice on the left, the people who sit less than 4 hours a day, they're pretty active, aren't they? And then the height of that bar represents their mortality from any cause, okay? Then the people who get 4 to 7.9 hours per day, what happens to their mortality? It goes up a little bit. And then as it goes along, by the time you're getting 8 to 10 hours or 11 hours or more per day of sitting, inactivity, what happens to mortality? It goes up to 1.4 times the risk. And so we can see that there's a significant increase. And their estimate is that about 219,000 people in the United States die each year early because they're not getting that recommended minimal exercise. So that gives us a pretty good clue, doesn't it? There's a story I like in the Bible, and Jesus is going to the pool of Bethesda, and there was a man brought there who was paralyzed. He was under the impression that if he could get to the water when it was troubled, that he would get healed, and he had been there for, I don't know, how many years was that? Almost 30 years, wasn't it? 28 years or something? And so Jesus walked up to the paralyzed man laying by the pool, and he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" Would you like Jesus to ask that question to you? Would you like to get well? And of course, I'm sure he had his attention, didn't he? And so Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Well, I'm going to suggest tonight that if you want to get well, what you need to do is get up out of the bed early in the morning or whenever, get up off of the seat and walk. And as we begin to move, we begin to stimulate laws of life in our body that help our whole body and mind be healthier. Here's a quotation again given over 100 years ago in the book Healthy Living. It's a compilation of writings of Ellen White. And it says, God designed that the living machinery should be in what kind of activity? Once a week? Twice a week? Daily activity. For in this activity or motion is its preserving power. The more we exercise, the better will be the circulation of the blood. And we know today that the better the circulation, all the organs of the body are improved, aren't they? It's the blood that circulates that brings the nourishment, that brings the oxygen, that brings everything the body, that every cell needs, every organ needs. And the better the circulation, the better their health. You know, some people, if they've smoked all their life, they get a type of disease where the blood to the legs is diminished and they can't get the blood down there, and it gets so bad that sometimes they have to amputate their legs. If they don't have blood there, they can't live, can they? And so circulation is important. If we don't get enough circulation to the brain, what happens? We have a stroke, don't we? If you get the circulation blocked to the heart and the heart can't get what it needs, what do we have? Doctors call it a myocardial infarction. The heart muscle dies because of a lack of oxygen. So we must have oxygen. The better the circulation, the better the health. And there's nothing that improves circulation as much as good exercise. Well, there's many benefits to exercise, aren't they? And we just list a few of them here. Sometimes in groups, or little smaller groups around a circle, we'll write them on the board. And it's kind of fun to see all the things that people realize we can do. But it certainly helps us to look and feel our best, doesn't it? It gives you more energy. How many of you would like more energy? As we get older, that'd be one thing we'd all like to see. We watch the young people running and having all that energy, and we wished we had some more. But that's one thing that exercise does. It actually increases. They can measure in the muscles. As you exercise on a regular basis from being sedentary, you get about a 35% improvement, increase in the mitochondria, the little parts of the cells that produce the energy in our muscles. Same thing that happens in our brain. So it gives us more energy. It prevents many serious diseases. We'll look at these in specifics. It relieves stress and promotes good mental health. Is that important today? You ever hear anybody that's stressed out today? Do you know anybody that's not stressed out today? We need that, don't we? And it's a natural release that helps us to balance out our life. So let's look at some of the evidence of things that it can do. First of all, let's look at the heart. If the heart stops beating, how long do we live? A few seconds, not long. Maybe 10 or 15 seconds and you pass out. And if it doesn't get started again, that's the end of it, isn't it? Every thought, every desire, every ambition disappears with it. So that's why it's so important to keep the heart healthy. And one of the things that we can do, of course, is exercising. And this study, as you look across the bottom of the graph, it simply shows the number of hours of walking per week. And again, the height of the bars represents the mortality rate. So the higher the bar, the higher the risk of dying. So we use as a comparison, those who get no exercise, that's on the left, we use that to represent that. You can easily use 100, or you can sometimes just use as a 1 and a decimal, but that's the rate. Now if you walk 1 hour per week, does it make a difference? Just 1 hour a week, it drops the mortality by almost 30%. So it does make a difference, doesn't it? How about if you get 3 hours per week? Cuts the risk of dying in half. So now you've got a little secret. You can go talk to your friends and say, I know how you can cut your risk of dying of a heart attack in half. What do you have to do? All you have to do is walk a half an hour a day. Isn't that something? Cut your risk in half. And that's our nation's #1 killer, isn't it? And what happens if you get more than that? What if you get 5 hours per week? Or even more? It keeps going down, doesn't it? So when Ellen White said we need an abundance of exercise, it's in that abundance that it's a preserving power and gives us benefits. All right, here's another one. It's a little bit more complicated because it's got both vigorous and moderate intensity. The vigorous is shown in the red, and the moderate activity, like walking, the vigorous might be jogging, is shown in the red. And then it just shows, it broke them down into this large group of people. How many was it? 90,000 people, and over several years. And then they looked at their mortality from the least active to the most active. Now the 1, 2, 3, and 4 are what we call quartiles. Quartiles simply means 25%. So the 25% of that population of 90,000 people who were the least active is the mortality rate we see on the left. The next 25% more active, what happens to their risk? It drops, doesn't it? And every time that they become more active, mortality rates drop. And those who were most active reduced their risk of dying from cardiovascular disease by, what was it? Almost 60%. Now, is there a big difference between the vigorous and the moderate? They're just about the same, aren't they? So if you can't get out and run yet at your age or whatever, what can you do? You can walk or do some other activity that's moderate that you enjoy, biking or swimming or something like that. But just becoming active, and it shows a huge difference in what you can do. Now, a fun way of doing it is keeping step of your tracks. Do any of you have little watches or your phone or whatever? You can get little apps and keeps track of your steps. Mine does, and it's fun to watch each day. Today I've been traveling on the road most of the day, so I only have 5,000 steps. But my goal is about 8,000 a day. My wife's got more. Okay, so you look at the number of steps per day that people did, and again, this is a large study of 16,000, and they take the average number of steps. Those are quartiles again, the 25% at the lowest, and then as it goes higher. And notice what happens as the steps go up per day, what happens to mortality? It's stepwise down, doesn't it? So the people who are getting 8,000 steps a day, less than half the risk of mortality from any cause. So now you can tell your friends, not only can I show you how to cut your risk of heart disease in half, I can show you how to cut your risk of any disease, of dying in half. And what do you have to do? You have to buy a little watch, count your steps, work up gradually over time to where you're doing at least 8,000 steps a day, and you can cut your risk of dying in half. Is that worth doing? It's quite amazing, isn't it? And again, as you study the human body and see what we do, those are the laws of life that God created in our bodies. There's another little rule that says that we use it, or what? We lose it. And so if we want it to be strong and healthy and fit and last us a lifetime and a long lifetime, if we take good care of it and get the exercise, it helps us to do that. I've got a healthy thumb there. We'll go back and look at that. Here's just another one. It says another study. And these are all published. You'll see the reference down there in the bottom from JAMA, is the Journal of the American Medical Association. And they simply divided this group of people in for an 11-year study, those who got 7,000 steps or more, or those who got less than that, and you look at the difference in mortality. Which of those two groups do you want to be in? One on the left or the one on the right? If you're on the right, look at the difference in there. That's about a 72% decrease in mortality. That's the group I want to be in. And to do that again, just get that 7,000 or 8,000 steps a day, and it makes that much difference. This is showing the same thing, only sort of a bar chart. It just shows a graph. But the fun thing about it, look at the blue one, first of all. That's women. Notice how it comes down. As the steps go up, number of steps on the bottom, from small number of steps to large number of steps on the right, notice mortality level. That's what that is showing. And where does it kind of you get the most benefit? It's right around about 10,000 steps, isn't it? If you do 15,000 steps, do you do any better? Actually, it shows it a little less. So you need a certain amount, but you can perhaps do too much, and somewhere around about 10,000 steps for most young adults is ideal. And if you look at seniors, probably around about 7,000 or 8,000 steps a day is best. The golden chart, or the line up there, is for men. They get benefit too, but who has the greatest benefit? Ladies, you have the greatest benefit from your exercise. All right. Now, here's another one, just one more. Sometimes it's good to look at different studies that have been done. Another one, this is 3,000 seniors, not seniors, but it's supposed to be seniors. If you see a typing error up there once in a while, my computer hasn't always learned to spell properly yet, so I'll apologize for that. But I was going to show you on my pointer, but it doesn't work up here. But the number of days per week that you got 8,000 or more steps. The people who got 0, you can see how high the chart is. And if you look on the left, it says all-cause mortality probability. And so the probability of dying, if you have 1 or 2 days a week where you're getting the 8,000 steps, it drops about half, doesn't it? And if you get 3 or 7 days per week, it drops down about half again. So you can see those are huge drops in mortality. And these are for seniors. And so even if we're older, getting that exercise has great benefit, doesn't it? And that was the same thing. Let's try the next one. Now, physical activity and cholesterol levels. What is cholesterol known for? If it gets too high, it plugs up our heart, doesn't it? It plugs up our arteries. So the blood can't get through. And when the blood can't get through, we have poor circulation, and that leads to problems, doesn't it? So if we want to keep healthy, we need to keep our cholesterol levels down. And so now it's a very interesting study. I have to explain the first one. They'll all be the same. But first of all, in the blue is the low-fit people. They actually put these people on a treadmill. This was done at the Aerobic Research Center in Dallas, Texas. They used our software, by the way, at their program down there, and I've been down there many times. And they've put me on their treadmill too, and they exercise you until you can't stand up anymore. And when you can't keep going for another second, then they lay you down and take the EKG and see how you're doing. So it's kind of a rigorous test. But anyway, that's what they did, and they found out how fit they are. The reason they do that is because when you ask a person how much they exercise, what would they say? Oh, I get a lot of activity. But it may not be enough to make them really be fit. So it's more objective, isn't it? A more objective measure of fitness, and that's why the results are a little better. So in the blue where it says low fit, there's their mortality rate for all the people, and if their cholesterol is normal. But if they were high fit, what do you see? The green one. It's down about a fourth, isn't it? Mortality is about a fourth less. So if you have normal cholesterol and you're sedentary, your risk of dying for heart disease is much higher, even though it's normal, than the person who's fit. So it has an advantage that way, doesn't it? Then you look over here on the one that's on high cholesterol. If your cholesterol is high, then you look at the blue bar, that's the low-fit people, and then you look at the green bar, and what do you see? It's way down, isn't it? If you have high cholesterol and you don't want to die early, what can you do? You can exercise regularly and get fit, and even with high cholesterol, it cuts your risk of dying in half. Now, one more comparison. On the right-hand side, just going to look at the green bar. These are the fit people. On the right, there's the risk of dying. And on the left is the people who have normal cholesterol who don't exercise, who are at greater risk. Do you see the differences there? The people who have normal cholesterol and are low fat, that'd be the blue chart on the left, and the ones that have high cholesterol but are exercising, they have a lower mortality than the people with high cholesterol. So when I'm working with people and they're having a hard time getting their cholesterol down, what do I tell them? Well, I'll tell them good things to do. But in addition to that, if you exercise every day, you will have a lower mortality than even the person who has normal cholesterol but doesn't exercise. So it's a big difference, isn't it? Okay, we're going to look at a couple charts that way. Here's another one on blood pressure. And let's just compare those two results again. The people with high blood pressure but who are exercising and are fit, you can see their mortality level. Compare that on the left, the blue, or the low-fit people, and their mortality level. Who's more likely to die? So if you have high blood pressure and you want to bring down your mortality, what can you do? You can exercise, a good brisk walking program, and it will actually bring your risk lower than the person who has normal blood pressure, but they're not exercising. Isn't that amazing? And so exercise, we're finding, is powerful medicine. There's a group now in the American Medical Association, a subgroup. They say that they've started this group that's on exercise, and they say exercise is medicine. It's more powerful than about any medicine they can give the person, even more powerful than the pills and so on for lowering your blood pressure. Exercise is protective. And we'll look at one more here on smoking. Who's more likely to die, the smoker who exercises or the non-smoker who's sedentary? The non-smoker has a higher mortality rate if he's not exercising than the person who smokes regularly but exercises. Is that kind of shocking? Now, I heard a story one time, I think it's just a rumor, but they told me that if you were a smoker, you couldn't be a member in the church, but if you were sedentary and overweight, you could be the head elder. Have I gone to meddling now? I don't know anybody here, so I think I'm safe. I'm sure your head elder is slim and trim and healthy as can be. But anyway, we kind of strain it in that sometimes to swallow a camel, don't we? Some things people do, we think, oh, that's worse. But we need all of these things, don't we? And why exercise is so important. Now, I'm not promoting smoking. I'm promoting exercise, okay? All right. Now, another thing that happens when we exercise, I'm supposed to be back here in the light. As you exercise, your blood fat levels go down. One of the things that you do when you're exercising is you burn up calories, of course, and part of those calories comes from burning the fat that's in your bloodstream. And so when you exercise, your blood fats go down. When your blood fats go down, what does that do for you? Well, again, it decreases your risk of a heart attack because the high blood fats, high triglycerides, can cause a heart disease just like high cholesterol. So we want to keep them at lower levels. And that's what this study shows. Again, we'll look, it was an interesting study. What they did is they took a group of people, and the first day they exercised. They just had them walk for 90 minutes. That's quite a walk, isn't it, for an hour and a half. And then the next day they measured their blood fat levels, and notice what you find. The fasting is the blue group. So that just means early in the morning they take your blood. And notice in the group who exercised compared to those who didn't get that 90 minutes of exercise the other day, that their blood fat levels are 20% lower. So what this means is even the next day, your blood cholesterol, your blood fat levels, I should say, were 20% lower. That's good news, isn't it? Then they fed the people, those who exercised and those who didn't, a high-fat meal, and look at the difference there. Again, those who had exercised, not that day, but the previous day, had 24% lower blood fat levels after a high-fat meal. So again, we'll occasionally like some fancy meals once in a while. Thanksgiving's coming up in here shortly, isn't it? So if you want to keep your blood fat levels low, what can you do? Even the day before, going out and exercising will help you to do that. I'm going to have to take a swig of water here, keep from choking up. Okay, isn't it interesting that in the physiology, exercise seems to affect everything and has a beneficial effect? Now, anybody here, any of the ladies want to prevent breast cancer? I think we all want to do that. That's something that's the leading cause of cancer for women in the United States, isn't it? And here they did a study. Again, they looked at fitness levels. They divided people simply into 3 categories: low fitness, moderate fitness, and high fitness. High fitness are the people who are exercising the most. And of course, the low fitness are those who don't do much or any exercise. And they followed these 14,000 women for 16 years. That's a very thorough study, isn't it? And what did they find? Did it make a difference? It cut their risk by 55%. That's a huge difference, isn't it? What if we could reduce the risk of breast cancer by half in the entire United States? Think of all the lives that would be saved and all the misery and the problems. Well, you can do that. If everybody would get on a good exercise program, that's what would happen. How about all cancer mortality? Again, this was the research center in Dallas, Texas, and they put them on treadmills and tested them so they know how fit they were and divided them into low, moderate, and high again, and simply, after 10 years, looked for who developed cancer and who didn't. And you can see on the left, the low-risk group, the moderately fit group, and the high-fit group, again, cut the risk of any cancer by 55%. Is that good news? I think it is good news, isn't it? Sometimes we think there's nothing you can do about cancer. You either get it or you don't. But it's not true. If we take good care of our health and exercise well, and tomorrow we're going to talk about things we can do in our diet that can help too, it can make a huge difference in whether we get cancer or not. It simply keeps all the body cells healthier, doesn't it? And so the body is able to combat it and fight it better. So here's something that came out in Journal of the American Medical Association showing a study how much regular exercises reduces cancers. And here's 13 different cancers. And look down through that list. You can look at the different one. Some of them that lowers it by 40%, some by 27%. And look at those different risks down there. So that's a study of 1.44 million people, the National Cancer Institute. When I get my little cancer donation slip in the mail each year from the American Cancer Society, I suppose you get one too, don't you? And on the back of the envelope it says, most cancers can be prevented. Have you noticed that? That's what the research shows. Most cancers can be prevented if you start early in life and do what you can to make a difference. And of course, regular exercise is one of the more important things that you can do in preventing cancer. How about hip fractures? As we get older, our bones tend to get weaker, don't they? More brittle. And people have falls and they break their hip. And if you break your hip, oftentimes, if that's late in life, that kind of leads to a downhill slide, doesn't it? People often don't recover from that. So what can we do to prevent fractures and hip fractures? Well, that's what they looked at in this study, where they took 61,000 women, and over a 12-year period, they simply again looked at their hours of brisk walking per week, and then measured who had hip fractures and who didn't. These were older women. And you can look at the inactive group and how high their rate was, and then if they got 1 to 2 hours, 3 to 4 hours, 5 to 6 hours, or 7 hours or more per week, and every time they increased their level of physical activity, what happened to the risk of hip fractures? Isn't that an amazing chart? Again on there, where do you want to be? We want to be on that right-hand side, don't we? Getting regular exercise. And so one of the things that exercise does is it stimulates the bones to be stronger. As you exercise, we put vertical stress on those bones. You know, in the early days, they tried to grow different types of tissue in a petri dish and do experiments on it. They had a hard time getting bone to grow. And the only way they could find to do it is they took and put a little clip on that fragment of the bone and put stress on it, and then the bone would grow just fine. But without that, it wouldn't grow. Now, other ways we've found this out is when we send the astronauts out into space, they're floating around the world out there. How much exercise are they getting? They're not even holding themselves vertically, they just float around. And when they come back, you know what they find? Significant decreased weakness in their bones. The calcium begins to come out of it. I was down in Florida where they shoot them up, Cape Canaveral, I think they call it. And one of the fellows that was up there that went around the moon while his buddies went down and walked on the moon was telling his story. And he says, now I've been up in space long enough that I have severe osteoporosis, even though I run all the time and things back on Earth. But because of those times up there where I didn't have the stress on those bones that I needed, the bones have demineralized. So if you want your bones to be strong, you can eat all the calcium in the world you want, but it won't make them strong unless you put exercise with it. And as you put exercise with it and put stress on those bones, that's like lifting weights and things and walking for the hip bones and so on, all of that stimulates those bones to be stronger. By the way, it also stimulates your body to absorb the calcium and utilize it better. Now here's a little kind of a difficult slide perhaps to look at, but I'll try to explain it. Sometimes people say, well, if I exercise too much, I'm going to get arthritis and might have sore knees. Have you heard that? I've heard that a lot. But here's what the research shows, that that's not true. In fact, it's just the opposite. Okay, over there on the right-hand side of the chart, you see where it says in red, no exercise, that line? That's for people who don't get any exercise. We're going to use that as a measurement of standard. Then we're going to look at people who exercise and see if they have more or less arthritis of the knee. If it goes to the right, that means increased risk. If it goes to the left, it means a decreased risk. So the first one upstairs is if they did, and I should mention this is over 1,000 people, if they did any strenuous physical activity, notice that those bars are quite a ways over to the left, aren't they? About a 66% or 75%, which would be about a 25% less than those who don't exercise. So if you exercise, you're going to have less arthritis of the knee. And you look at the two bottom ones, on moderate exercise, the same thing, isn't it? In fact, the moderate strenuous, low to moderate, with a little strenuous occasionally, was just almost as good as doing the strenuous physical exercise. So when you're out there walking, don't be afraid that you're going to do damage to your body and you won't be able to walk when you get older. It actually helps your joints. And if you work with arthritis doctors today, if you have arthritis, what do they tell you to do? They tell you to be active, don't they? They want you to do what you can, don't want to overdo it, but do what you can, because if you're active, you'll have actually less pain and less arthritis in the knees. How about diabetes? Is diabetes a problem today? You hear about it on the news? It's one of our fastest growing diseases, isn't it? And they estimate that the generation that's being born today, about 1 out of every 3 will develop diabetes in their lifetime. It's becoming so prevalent. So whatever we can do to prevent diabetes is very, very important. And here the researchers looked, again, about 70,000 women in this case over 10 years, and they simply looked at their activity level from the 1 being the least active to the 5, the most active, and notice what happens every time activity increases. What happens to the risk of getting diabetes? It goes down, doesn't it? Exercise is one of the most important things we can do in preventing diabetes. As you exercise, it makes your body use the insulin you have more effectively. In fact, exercise works almost the same as insulin. And it helps to get the sugar inside the body cells where it's used, rather than accumulating in the blood and causing high blood sugar and diabetes. So regular exercise, those walking 40 to 60 minutes most days, cut their risk of developing diabetes in half. Think what that would do to our nation if we could cut diabetes in half. It's not only one of the most, one growing so rapidly, but it's also the most costly disease you can have. When I was working with large corporations, we would try to identify where the high costs were coming from. And the people who were diabetic always had the highest amounts. And there's a lot of complications from diabetes, isn't there? It can make you go blind. It can affect the circulation to your legs, where sometimes they have to amputate your foot or your leg because of poor circulation. It's the most common cause of heart attack. If you have diabetes, the thing you're most likely to die from is heart disease. And so it's got a lot of complications, and we want to prevent those. And one of the best ways we can do that is exercise on a regular basis. How about the brain? You want to keep your brain healthy? We find that exercise is also one of the best things you can do for your brain. And here's a quote that just came out here. It's kind of recent research, October 3 of 2024, just about a week ago. And this is what I'm just quoting from Harvard Medical School in their notice they put out. It says, exercise has brain benefits. Many studies suggest that parts of the brain that control thinking and memory are larger in volume. You have more brain matter when you're exercising than people who don't exercise. And then their summary was, exercise can boost your memory and thinking skills. You want to boost your memory? You want to boost your thinking skills? You want your brain to work right? It's important, isn't it? And exercise is one of the protective things to the brain that we can do. You know, when we reach our age, I see a lot of you are kind of close to my age. Some of you are much younger, but the brain begins to atrophy a bit. Did you know that? You lose about 1% of your brain mass per year, 1 to 1.5%. Now that's if you're sedentary. But if you exercise as you get older, you can actually reverse that and actually grow more brain cells in your brain as you get older. And I have some more studies on that. I do a presentation on Alzheimer's disease, and we show those studies. So what exercise does is it stimulates the brain, produce certain kinds of things. Did I put it in there? I didn't. It's in my notes. There's a substance that the brain cells produce that stimulates the brain to grow more brain cells, and exercise increases that. I'm trying to remember the name of the protein. Help me out, Gary. It's in my notes, but I can't see my notes. Brain. Reading helps. Yeah. Mental things help. Yeah, interacting with people help. There's a lot of things that stimulate the brain. And one of them that does, one of the most powerful things that you can do is exercise. Brain-derived stimulating factor. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's it. Thank you. I'm supposed to stand over here?
No, your notes. Isn't it down there?
No, it isn't on this one. If I had my computer here, it does. It shows all my notes. Okay, and that's the substance that stimulates the cells in the brain to grow. And if you exercise, you can actually measure that in the blood, that it increases. And that's why exercise can actually increase your brain volume, have bigger, more brain cells. Here's just a study on dementia. The opposite of having strong or healthy brains is dementia, isn't it? It doesn't work the way that it should. And here's again the Aerobic Research Center. They actually tested people in their fitness and put them in the low, moderate, or high fitness categories. And then notice what happens after 17 years. Look at the difference between the dementia mortality in those who had low fitness and dementia mortality in those who had moderate or high fitness. What did it do? It cut it in half. You want to cut your risk of dementia in half. What do? I hope you go home and share this with your friends, because that way we can spread the good news, can't we? You can cut your risk of dementia in half if you get regular exercise and stay fit throughout your life. So it's a lot of benefits, aren't there, as we go through these. Then it's how about our total mortality, how long we're going to live, and that's what these studies are doing here. And look at the size of this study, 654,000 people. Over 10 years, they looked at their physical activity in minutes per day, and notice as the minutes goes up, what happens to mortality? Every time you get a little more exercise, the mortality goes down, doesn't it? Okay. Notice that the biggest jump is even that 10 minutes a day. Isn't that interesting? Going from doing nothing to something on a regular basis. So the new mantra and the guidelines for Americans on physical activity, it says, any activity you do is beneficial. But they'd like you to get at least a half an hour a day to get good benefits. And this shows that if you get even a little more than that, it helps more. I need all the help I can get, so I try to shoot for about a half an hour in the morning and about a half an hour in the evening. Gives me an hour a day and gives me that little extra benefit. Now, fitness, and particularly this time, is looking just at seniors. And do seniors need to exercise? Well, again, as you look at these categories, they're measuring their peak aerobic fitness, just simple things. It's from low fit to high fit again. And as you look at those different categories, those are quintiles, 20%. Every time there's a 20% increase in your fitness level, mortality drops significantly. Those are a huge difference, aren't they?
What are you considering a senior?
What's the age of a senior?
65 and above.
65 and above, okay.
Yeah. Usually, they don't give you Medicare and all. I guess you can get Medicare at 65. But you can't get your...
67.
It's 67 now for your other part, isn't it? So that maybe senior age is going up. But generally, they consider 65 and above. So is it important if we get 65 and above, we don't need to exercise anymore? Well, you can do that, but you notice the difference in mortality there. Huge difference, isn't it? So if you want to stay young, one of the things you can do to stay young is to stay active. So here's what they're recommending. These are the guidelines. Notice that every U.S. adult should accumulate 150 to 300 minutes per week. 150 minutes would be about a half an hour, 20 to 30 minutes every day. If you are a jogger, you can get that faster, same amount of distance or whatever. So you can go only 115 minutes, that's the next line. But most of us need about a half an hour of moderate exercise. But notice that if you get twice that much, if you get an hour, there's added benefits. Most of the benefit comes in the first half hour, but there's additional benefits as you do a little more. And if you can get out in a pretty setting and enjoy the walk by the lake or by the ocean in our winter. In the summertime, we live up in Oregon, where we live on the beach. We like to go walking on that beach, and it's very enjoyable. And all of the pretty greenery up there. We don't see so much of that in the south. But anyway, a pretty walk is healthy for the body and the brain, isn't it? Now, here's the guidelines from what we used to call the Institute of Medicine. Now it's called the National Academy of Medicine. And they're recommending for all Americans, it says to prevent weight gain and to gain optimal health benefits from physical activity, you need to get how much? 60 minutes daily. What they're saying is there's a problem in the United States that a lot of us are gaining more weight than we need. Have you heard that? Have you seen that? It's pretty hard not to notice, isn't it? As a nation, we're getting bigger and bigger. And it says to overcome that, we need to even get more than the 30 minutes. If you want to really keep the weight down, most research shows you need to get about twice that. You need to get about an hour a day. That's why I do a half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening. And if I do that, I can keep my weight down. If I don't, it begins to go up a little bit. Now, here's a quotation, written again, an instruction for our church back over 100 years ago. And I like this one. It says, all who can possibly do so ought to walk in the open air once a week. Oh, excuse me, twice a week. Is that what it says? Every day. Isn't that kind of radical? Extreme? That's what she says. Every day, summer or winter. So if it's summer, what do? You get up early in the morning, right? And we get out before it gets too hot. In the winter, what do? You put a coat on. When we lived in Portland in the winters, we had to put a hat and a raincoat on. But anyway, if you get dressed properly in proper times of the days, you can be active. Every day. It says that walk even in winter would be more beneficial to the health than all the medicine the doctors may prescribe. Do you believe that? You just saw what we looked at. All those things we looked at. That's what exercise can do for us. Exercise is powerful medicine, isn't it? Anyway, I like that quote. It's one of my favorite. And so you need to choose activities that you can do, that you enjoy, that's within your capabilities and so on. And moderate activities, when you get my age, that's what I like, is moderate activities. It takes a little strain off of the body. And you can see some things on there. Walking is something most all of us can do. I like to bicycle too. Bicycle is even gentler on the body than walking. And swimming is very gentle on your body too, isn't it? So there's a lot of good things you can do. If you're young and vigorous and you want to get even in higher fitness shape, of course, more vigorous activities do that, don't they? When I was younger, I used to run 6 miles every day for about 30 years. Every morning, I could run about 6 miles in an hour, and that was my routine. And then as I later on, I had an office that was about 6 miles from home, I should say. So I'd run to the office. Then my wife would pick me up and bring me home. But anyway, that was when I was younger. Now my back won't let me do that anymore, but I can still walk. So I get out in the morning, and I do my 2 or 3 miles in the morning, and then I like to bicycle later on in the day when it gets cooler again. So find out what you enjoy doing, because if you don't enjoy it, you won't keep it up, will you? But what you enjoy doing, it'll have a good long time benefit your whole life. Now, how about the total time? Notice up there it says it's not necessary to do all of your activity at one time. You can break it up. You used to think you had to do it all at once, but you don't. Even as short a period as 10 minutes, you can do 10 minutes early in the morning and 10 minutes at noon, 10 minutes at night, and many times that fits into people's schedules a little better than doing it all at once. So fit it in just as you get the time for the day. And then down there again, remember at the bottom, remember any activity has benefits. So if someday you can just get out for a few minutes, that's okay. The next day you might be able to do it a little longer. How intense should your exercise be? Well, as you are, especially are younger and healthier, the more intense you do, the faster it builds up your fitness. But the older we get, the more careful we need to be, don't we, not to overdo. And so there's a little phrase we use, a mantra. When you exercise, you should never be out of breath. You may huff and puff just a little bit, and it should feel, as it says up there, fairly easy to somewhat hard, but you're never out of breath. If you can't talk to somebody, if you were walking together, you're going too fast. You need to slow down a little bit, and then you'll be able to finish your time without overdoing it. So watch the intensity, and sometimes if you work up a little sweat, that's showing that your body core temperature is raising a little bit, and that has health benefits too. And so that's a good benefit or a good sign that you're getting good exercise. So here's a study done on walking pace, and they took these large 72,000 women, and they had those who were walking less than 2 miles per hour, 2 to 2.9, and 3 or more miles per hour, and who had the lowest mortality? Those who were walking a little more briskly. Now, how fast is a 3-mile walk? 3-mile-an-hour walk. If you walk 3 miles in an hour, that means about every 20 minutes you finish a mile, don't you? And that's what I find today. That's a nice moderate pace. I can do 3 miles, no problem. A mile every 20 minutes. But during that time, if you are able to go a little faster once in a while, maybe you've come to a hill, and that gives you a little more challenge, doesn't it? They call that, what do they call that?
Interval training. I do interval training.
Interval training. I knew you knew. I did too, but sometimes I can't remember at the moment. Interval training, what that means is by putting a little extra effort in and speeding up your heart a little bit and breathing a little harder, and then resting a little bit. What's that doing? It's challenging your body to do a little bit more than it's used to. You don't have to do it very long, maybe just 20 or 30 seconds. And when you're riding your bike, you can just ride a little faster once in a while for just 30 seconds or so, and then go at an easy pace again. So kind of hard and easy that stimulates your body a little bit to build it up and to be stronger. If you don't ever do above what you're capable, you're not going to get stronger, are you? So that's the idea of the interval training, is just to do it a little more vigorous from time to time. Progression. What we need to do is to start out very carefully. I remember when I was working in a hospital setting in Portland, we did exercises for the community. One lady came in, she was a very large lady, and she had very high blood pressure, and she wanted to come and join my exercise class. And so I checked her blood pressure, and if I remember right, it was about 180 on the top number, and I think 110 on the bottom number. Now, the doctors told me when it gets that high, they should be hospitalized. And so I explained to her, I said, I'm sorry, your blood pressure is so high, I don't think you can join our exercise class. You'll have to go talk to your doctor. She says, why do you think I'm here? The doctors told me to come. She says, I had to get some exercise. I wasn't going to live very long. And so I said, well, okay, but we're going to have to go very easy and very carefully. And so I would just walk with her, and we could go no more than 5 minutes, and she was huffing and puffing. And fortunately, we had benches around our walking course. And so we'd sit and rest a little bit. Then she'd go 5 more minutes, and then she'd rest a little bit. You see, progress very gradually, just 5 minutes at a time. And then after a few weeks, she was up to doing 10 minutes at a time, and then pretty soon up to 15 minutes. And by the end of the 10 weeks, she was doing her half an hour a day. Still doing them in smaller segments, but getting the half an hour a day. So building up slowly. And then when we checked her blood pressure at the end, what do you suppose it was? It was 140 over 90. Now that's still a little higher than we'd like to see it, but it was way down from the dangerous area, and her doctor was very pleased. And of course she was very pleased too. So what happens when you exercise? Your arteries go like this to let more blood through. They expand, don't they? And that's what keeps your arteries flexible. If you exercise them and they're doing this all the time, it's stretching those arteries, and then your blood pressure doesn't have to be so high, you see, to get the blood through. And so it's one good way of reducing your blood pressure. New research now also shows that stretching exercises do the same thing. Because as you turn and as you do different stretches and so on, you're not only stretching the muscle, what else are you stretching? The blood vessels in there, aren't you? And so it's just as effective in doing stretching to lower your blood pressure as it is aerobics. So they're both important. Now, gradually, you might start a few minutes a day, work up to the 30. If you're young and healthy and you want to do more, you can work yourself up gradually. Just do it gradually, and if you do it gradually, your body will adapt. Now, how about, it says if you have heart disease or diabetes or other serious problems, what do? Just talk to your doctor about it. Get their guidance and get their okay and their suggestions. Doesn't mean you shouldn't exercise. You may need it more than others. Just do it carefully. And here's a statement that came out by the American Heart Association and also by the American College of Sports Medicine. And it says most adults do not need to see their physician before starting what kind of a program? A moderate exercise program. That's when you don't exercise so hard you get out of breath or whatever. Do it at an easier pace. That's safer, isn't it? But it says anyone with the chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, and so on, get your doctor's guidance to make sure that it's safe. And then some doctors say down below here, if you're sedentary, it's even more important to go see your doctor to see if it's safe for you to be sedentary. Because that's a higher risk, isn't it? Okay. Strength and flexibility. So we also need to do some strengthening. And what we find, especially as we get older, again, I'm supposed to stand back here and that won't happen. As we get older, we begin to lose muscle mass, just like we talked about in the brain. So every year past the age of about 50, we lose again about 1% or more of our muscle mass. That's not good, is it? We need those muscles to stay strong and so on. And if we get weak and we can't take care of ourselves, then what do? They put us in the nursing home, don't they? Somebody to take care of you. If you want to be independent and stay independent in your own home and have a good, long, healthy life, strengthening exercises is very important, especially as you get older. Flexibility is also important, helps to keep the joints healthy and so on. You can see some of the advantages up there. So we need some of those kinds of exercises too. You can do some of them at home. You can get a book and follow some exercises. You can get a good friend who's an exercise guru and have them help you develop an exercise routine. You can get a trainer, or you can go to the gym and they have trainers there that show you what kind of exercises to do, and they'll help you to get started so that you can strengthen your arms and your shoulders and your back and your stomach and your hips and thighs and legs. All of them need exercise, don't they? Here's just an interesting study that was done on vitamin D. And vitamin D is important in keeping our muscles healthy. And notice here, they looked at serum vitamin D levels in 3,000 some seniors. And people with low vitamin D were 70% more likely to develop muscle weakness. That's a huge difference, isn't it? Do you know what your vitamin D level is? How do you know what your vitamin D level is? You have to have your doctor check it for you. And I encourage everyone these days to know what your vitamin D level is. It relates to a whole bunch of things, including your immune system. But if you want good strength and your muscles to be healthy, you need adequate vitamin D. And the doctor can draw your bloods and check that and tell you very quickly. Now, when I was living in Portland, Oregon, where it was cloudy all the time, I had my doctor check mine, my cardiologist, and what do you suppose I found? I was way down in the low category. He says, don't worry. He says, I checked mine the other day and mine was too. They just didn't get enough sunshine up there in the winter to get adequate vitamin D. You know, it's the sunshine that gives us vitamin D. Now, we get plenty of sunshine down here, but what do? We put all the sun lotion on like the doctors tell us to do. Put on our our other long sleeves, whatever, and our hats, or we stay inside. And so even though you live in a sunny condition now, you may not be getting enough vitamin D. And so get it checked. And I just take a little bit every day to keep mine up, and now mine's right up in the healthiest range where it should be. But I wouldn't have known had I not checked it. Here's just a couple little studies on the importance of strength and mortality. Is strength important to live a long time? I used to think, well, what's strength have to do with long time, living a long time? But we've got some studies now that show that. One simple test was simply people doing sit-ups. Again, this is about 4,000 men and aged 20 to 69 in a 13-year study, so it's quite a large study. And they tested their strength in two ways. One was how many sit-ups can they do? Now, when I worked with Safeway Corporation and Nike Corporation and all these companies, we would actually do a fitness test. And we would do how many push-ups they could do and how many sit-ups they could do. And we had the little hand grip dynamometer, and we would check their strength and so on. And then as they would exercise, we'd see if they could improve that. But that's what they did in this study. And then they compared people. And notice here on those who, on sit-ups, the low is the yellow, low number of sit-ups, and the green is the high number of sit-ups. And does it make a difference in mortality? Those are huge differences. It was about 3 times the difference on sit-ups, wasn't it? In grip strength, almost twice as much. So what we're finding is muscle mass is important for survivability. If you want to live a long time, you need to have a good muscle mass. Here's the one on push-ups. And again, this is for risk of cardiovascular disease. This was again printed in a doctor's medical journal, JAMA. And how many push-ups could you do? And you can see from 0 to 10 to 20 and to 30 and so on. And boy, is there a difference in mortality. What that's measuring is your strength. If you want to prevent a heart attack or a stroke and live a long time, having good strength gives your body a survival advantage to do that. Those are huge differences. And here we actually measured lean body weight, which is muscle mass, basically, isn't it? And mortality. And they took a group of 875 subjects, 65 and above. They calculated their lean muscle mass. And those that were in the bottom third, those who had the lowest lean muscle mass, you can see their mortality on the left. And the third of the people who had the highest lean muscle mass is their mortality on the right. Which of those two groups do you want to be in? That's a huge difference, isn't it? How many times difference is that? About 7 or 8 times difference, isn't it? So if you want to have a good survivability, you need to maintain that muscle mass. And that's why strengthening exercises, along with the walking and the other aerobics, the biking and so on, then you need to have good strength exercise too. And that gives you that survival advantage. So the bottom line is, if you want to be independent as you get older, try to do regular strength exercises. Oh my, what happened there? I must have pushed the wrong button. It must be time to go home. Maybe you can help me out back there. Hey, there we go. That's right at the very beginning. Now if we can run down through that, maybe if I held this down right quick. Just take my thumb off before it gets too far. Did that one, didn't we? We did walking pace, progression, medical clearance, strength. We were looking at those, weren't we? Now, case studies. Shall we do some case studies? Let's take some real people I've worked with over the years. Just a few here we'll look at. The first one is Ben Levinson. Ben lived in a assisted living facility there in Portland, Oregon, where I was living at the time. And he was 90 years of age. And as people get older and they lose lean muscle mass, it becomes hard for them to walk. Maybe you've seen older people, and because they have so little strength, they don't have very good balance. So first thing they do is they kind of get their feet out, you know, because they don't want to fall. And then they kind of have a little shuffle. And that's the way Ben was walking down the aisle in his home where he was living. Now, fortunately, they had a fitness instructor that worked there at that center. And he says, Ben, I think I can get you to walk better if you come down and join our fitness class. So he said, well, maybe I should. So at 90 years of age, he went down and he began to work some specific exercises. So first of all, he wanted to get the back muscles strong so he could stand up straight again. So he worked on back exercises. He worked on the leg muscles, some pushes with his legs and things so he could build up those muscles. His legs would be stronger. And after a few months of doing that, instead of being all bent over and all like this, he was standing up straight. And he was walking like a normal person again. He had strengthened those. And then he got to walking on the treadmill, and he did the treadmill about 20 minutes 3 times a week. And he got to feeling so good, by the time he was 103 years of age, they were holding the Senior Olympics in Portland, and he decided, I want to go down and compete. So bless his heart, he went down, and he decided to join the shot put. And he set a world record for men over 100 on the shot put. Now, he didn't have a lot of competitors. But what a change it made in his life, from being someone who could hardly take care of himself to he could walk good and he exercised good and he felt good and he was strong enough to throw the shot put. So at whatever age you are, the research shows that if you exercise those muscles, they get stronger and better and give you better function. Here's another lady, Mavis Lindgren. She lived kind of in this area down here. Anybody know Mavis? Oh, there's a few hands. Mavis was an interesting case because in her 60s, she was in very poor health. She got pneumonia every winter. And the doctors told her, Mavis, if you don't get in better health, you may not make it through the next winter. He says, I want you to go out and start walking. So she thought, well, I better get doing something. I might not make it next year. So she went out and she started walking. And the further she walked, the better she felt. And then her son one day came home and he says, Mom, he says, I've signed you up for a 10K race. And she said, you did what? She's in her 60s. He says, I've never done anything like that. And he said, well, you just get out and you walk a little bit and then you jog a little bit and walk and jog, you know, the interval training again. And take your time and work up and you'll be able to do that. And so that's what she did. And after several months of training like that, she did real well. And she entered the 10K race and she had a good time doing it. And she started doing several of those. When I met Mavis, it was at Loma Linda. When I came to Loma Linda, they didn't have a running club, so I started one. Maybe you've heard of the Loma Linda Lopers. Have you heard of that? Anybody? Okay, I started that back in 1972. And we had a good time getting people together and exercising of all ages. And then we started something that was called a marathon. How far is that? Anybody know? 26 miles. And so many yards. I forget the feet. That's a long ways. That's further than you ever have to go. But for a running group, you know, that was the fun thing. So everybody wanted to do a marathon. So I started the first marathon. We called it the Orange Grove Marathon. She came that year. She was 72 at that time. She ran that whole distance of 26 miles. I can remember her coming across the line yet. Her hair was just like she'd gotten out of the beauty shop. Just slim and trim, just doing so well. A 21-year-old girl came with her the last 3 miles, and she was huffing and puffing and all done in. And Mavis just sailed across the line, no problem. And the reason is because she has been training 50 miles a week. She was in real good shape. So she went on then and did all kinds of races. I've run the Portland Marathon with her maybe 3 or 4 times. We've done the LA Marathon together. What are some of the other ones we've done together there? Los Angeles, New York, Portland, of course. She went to London, I went to Paris. Did mine in Paris. But anyway, we had a good time together. And she would come up to Portland and she would run. And one time she got jostled in the crowd and she fell down and broke her arm. And she held up her arm and she walked quickly to the aid station. He says, quick, bind up my arm. I've got to finish this race. They put a splint on it. She went ahead and finished the race, then went to the doctor and got it fixed. That was the kind of lady she was. So I would invite her to come and talk to the employees of the hospital because I was running the employee wellness program for the hospital. And I would interview her and talk about things that she would do. I would say, now, how often do you exercise, Mavis? She said, I exercise every day. I said, well, it's probably some days you don't feel very good and you take a day off once in a while, don't you? She thought for a minute and she says, I haven't missed a day in the last 8 years. Now, why did she start exercising? She was so sickly. She was not getting well at all. She had very bad health. Ended up in the hospital every winter. And now she could exercise every day, never missed a day in 8 years. Well, she went on to live over 100 years. I was at her 100th birthday. I don't know if Any of you were there too, but it was fun to see her celebrate. And in her lifetime, she did how many marathons, does it say? 75 marathons. I've done 20. I thought that was good. She started at 60 and did a lot more than I ever did. So there's the pictures of her. She had a wonderful time, a wonderful life, and it did a lot for her life. Now, don't think that you have to run marathons, but what it shows is that at any age, if you start to exercise and so on, your health will improve, your function will improve. And here's one more. This is Gladys. She's from Oregon. She's an Adventist, and she also liked to run, but notice she didn't start until what age? 86. That's an awful old age to start to train for a marathon, but she wanted to do one. She began to exercise, and she found that as more she exercised, the better she felt, and so on. And I ran that with a marathon with her in Honolulu. And she was so excited, and she was, how old does it say? She was 92, the oldest lady in America at that time to ever finish a marathon. There was another fellow about 90 that was also in the race that day, and I had met him too. And he'd started early, and so halfway through the race, I caught up with him, and I said, you know, there's a 92-year-old lady behind you. I said, make sure she doesn't pass you. He says, I sure hope not. So they were having fun going out in their old age and doing these things. Again, you don't have to run marathons, but it's interesting to find these people. She also lived to be 100, and she talks about some of the things. She's a vegetarian, and she says it's also important to have a good attitude. If you have a good attitude and you're happy and you be positive and look forward to things in your life, he says you'll do a lot better. So she had good mental health and good physical health. And then there's sometimes people complain because their feet hurt. I can't exercise because my feet hurt. I had an uncle who was that way. He was a physician. And I would try to get him to exercise, and he said, I can't. I hurt my ankle one time, or broke it or something, and he says, I got arthritis and I can't walk. Well, then later he developed heart disease. And his cardiologist told him, he said, if you want to live, you got to get out and walk. So what do you suppose he did? He went out and started walking. Pretty soon he told me one day, he says, I'm doing 5 miles a day now. He was so proud of what he'd accomplished. I said, well, Uncle, I thought you had a bad ankle, you couldn't walk. Well, I found out if I started doing it and so on, it wasn't that bad and actually didn't get any worse, and he was feeling a lot better. So sometimes we make excuses, don't we? And sometimes the people say, I complained about bad feet until what? I met the people without feet. Well, this is an interesting lady. I've run, I don't know how many marathons with her, several in Los Angeles. She has no feet, but she's out there and doing the marathon. She's not letting it slow her down, and she's not letting that be an excuse. Okay, well, these are some examples. And just as a summary, as you start your exercise program, start with a warm-up. Just kind of ease into your exercise. Don't go out real hard right at the beginning. It's good for your body to adjust gradually. Choose activities you enjoy and are within your capacity. Don't overdo. Work up to 20 to 30 minutes most days. Keep your activity so it feels moderate to somewhat hard, but don't be out of breath. We even teach that to the marathon runners. You should never be out of breath, otherwise you're not going to finish the race. And your progression, start easy, work yourself up gradually, both in intensity and in time, and add your strengthening and stretching. So be active for a lifetime. It's good to have goals. And we have a little handout today. Did we get a handout to everyone? It's just a little sheet of paper, but it's one that I've used. I started with Nike Corporation with that. And it's got a way that you can take any activity you do, whether it's swimming or biking or whatever, turn it into aerobic miles, and then have an aerobic mile goal. Remember, we had the 100-mile club and the 500-mile club and the 1,000-mile club at Nike and so on, and people would work and work really hard to get there, and then they got a special T-shirt, and I'm in the 1,000-mile club, and it was fun to see those people really work to have a goal. And so your goal might be just to do 30 minutes a week, 30 minutes a day, or 20 minutes a day, work yourself up gradually. My goal right now is to get about an hour a day, and I like to keep track of my steps. So my goal is to get 8,000 steps a day, and if I get 10,000 once in a while, that's fun. But at least if I get my 7,000 or 8,000 a day, it puts me in those low-risk categories, doesn't it? So have a goal, whether it's time or your steps or whatever. Keep track of it. And it's fun to keep track. I've been doing it for 30 years now, and I can go back and see what I used to do and what I did earlier. And what I find is if the first of the week I'm not doing too well, then what I do the last half of the week. And I work a little harder, don't I? So I reach my goal. So have little goals that helps you to do it. And keeping that written record is one of the things that has helped people. And one last thought this is from a quotation from Ellen White again. It says, Jesus is attractive. He is full of love, mercy, and compassion. He proposes to be our friend, to walk with us through all the rough pathways of life. He says to us, I am the Lord thy God. What is it? Walk with me, and I will fill thy path with light. If you want good physical and spiritual health and mental health, walking with the Lord every day. Sometimes when I'm out walking, I like to take a little Bible verse and just memorize it as I'm walking. Or you can pray while you're walking, can't you? You can have a good time out there. So be active, walk with the Lord, let him bless your life with good, abundant life. Now we can take some time for some questions if you'd like.
I guess, I always thought, well, what about nutrition? What about vitamins? What about all these? I just never put exercise as being so important.
It is, isn't it?
And it's just amazing to me.
It affects every part of our life.
Thank you for sharing that, and we'll get the rest of the story, I'm sure, the next few times. But yeah, let's open it up for questions quickly here. Okay, we've got one here. Let's do it.
We had fires recently, and I couldn't go walking, so I used a stationary bike and did about 5 miles on it. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely. She says if the air quality is not good, you have smoke or something out there, exercising in your home like on a stationary bicycle, or if you have an exercise program you can put on the TV and exercise with someone, those are good ways of doing it. And if it's real hot temperature and you can't get out, or if you have trouble you might fall or something, that's a safe way to exercise too. So yeah, a stationary bicycle is very good.
And I did develop osteoarthritis, but now I'm walking briskly for 30 plus minutes, and it doesn't bother me at all anymore,
Isn't it amazing how the body adapts?
Yeah, it adapts. And someone that I might suggest you add to that cases is Hulda Crooks.
Yes.
She was my hero.
Oh, we didn't put Hulda up there. She could have been another one. This is Mavis Lindgren.
Oh, yeah. But Hulda Crooks, you might want to add her. But she was my hero. I had her autograph.
Yes.
But, she did it by climbing mountains and stuff.
Yes, she was a member of our Loma Linda Lopers too.
Yeah.
I remember one early Sunday morning, I was out jogging and I came across her, and there was a flight of about 100 steps up. And she was running up those steps. Then she'd turn around and walk back down. Then she'd run back up. I says, Hulda, what are you doing? She says, I'm training to climb Mount Whitney. She climbed Mount Whitney every year.
The oldest person at 92 to climb Mount Fuji in Japan.
Yes, Mount Fuji, she climbed as well. She was quite a good example for all of us. A question over here.
Hi, I really appreciated your presentation. Very, very good information. My question is, does exercise help prevent the common cold, and if so, how?
It does. One of my latest books I wrote was how to keep your immune system healthy. And one of the studies that we've done is exercise is very helpful in increasing your immune system, which decreases the amount of colds and flu and so on you get. And in some of those studies, they would actually inject cold germs in people's noses. And they would take a sedentary group of people and a fit group of people and do the same, inject them, and see who got colds. This is what kind of research that mad scientists do. And the people who exercise only had about half as many colds as the people who were sedentary and got the same exposure. So keeping your immune system as high is good. One other story on that. During the epidemic of, started to say AIDS, but COVID. During the COVID epidemic, they were looking for all kinds of things to do to keep people safe. And so Kaiser did a very interesting study. They had about 50,000 people in it. And they looked at their eating habits, their weight, whether they had diabetes or not, whether they had heart disease, all these kinds of things that they said raised the risk for getting COVID. And then they looked at their exercise level. And they found that the very best predictor of people being able to not get COVID, just because their immune system was working better, was the people who were exercising. It was more predictive and more powerful to protect you against COVID than was if you was obese, if you had diabetes, if you had heart disease, if you had all these other kinds of things, that comorbidities they called them, that raised your risk. Exercise was the very best thing for preventing it. So we have a lot of research that it's very good for the immune system.
Another question? Okay, here we go.
Dr. Hall, what do you think of people wearing masks when they're doing exercise? Just what's your opinion?
Good point, good question.
Well, the research shows that when you're outside, all those little particles disappear and the sunshine kills them, and you don't have to wear a mask when you're outside, and especially when you're exercising.
Yeah, I've seen that, and it just drives me crazy.
I think this goes back to when you were talking about vitamin D and vitamin D deficiency. And I take early morning walks, and so I've been told that the UVA rays or the UV rays in the morning are not the same as, let's say, noon or 3 o'clock. And when I took my labs, I'm not vitamin D deficient, so
Good.
I don't know if it's a correlation or not, but what opinion do you have in terms of the time of day that we can expose ourselves? I don't use sun protection.
Yeah, there's good things and bad things about sunshine. Good things is we have to have sunshine to live. It kills germs. It helps us to make vitamin D. It helps our mental health. When you live up in Portland and it's cloudy for a whole month, you never see the sun, you're beginning to get depressed. So the sun has a lot of good things it does for us. If you get too much of it, it can cause skin cancers, can it? So you have to be careful. A little bit early in the morning when it's not so direct is a better time to be out. But it's in the high right overhead and so on, you probably better cover up because that might be your greater hazard. But getting some sunshine every day on the skin is good for us.
Now, I've heard of happy lights, but how does that work in your system, especially for people who are in Portland? I've seen people purchasing happy lights.
If you aren't getting enough bright light, which has an effect on the body, you tend to become depressed.
But does that give you
And it actually helps your body to produce certain hormones that help you to feel better.
Right, but does this happy light provide you with vitamin D, or is it just
Yeah,
the
it could.
exposure?
You'd have to look at what the UV and the lights, what the spectrums they are, and so on. But yeah, they can be helpful.
Related to that, circadian rhythm, that's what I think you're referring to.
No.
Okay, but the light in the morning, my understanding is so very important. It just kind of sets the body tone or something.
Good for our circadian rhythms, isn't it?
Yes.
And that affects the hormones in our body.
That's the hormones.
That helps us to feel better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, another question. Okay, whoops, I'm sorry. One right here and then back there.
My question has to do with the heartbeat rate per minute. If your resting rate is, say, 60, and how high is it safe to go with exercise?
Exercise heart rate is a way of measuring your intensity. And in the early days, they had everybody calculate your heart rate based on your age and so on. You could calculate a heart rate that if you got it up in that range, you would build up your fitness level quickly. What we do today that's more practical is we monitor your breathing. When you exercise, you're supposed to be breathe deeply. Huff and puff a little bit. But you should still be able to carry on a conversation if you were talking with someone. And that's a better indicator than your pulse. It's just a safer and an easier one. But yeah, it's an indicator. As you exercise, your heart rate goes up. Now, if people have a heart problem, sometimes their heart rate doesn't go up. And that's why you have to then be careful to look at how hard you're breathing.
I have another question. I'm in the dental field, and my concern and what I do is about tooth retention. And when I've read, do you know anything about exercise affecting the regrowth of bone around the teeth? What I've read is that exercise will help actually regenerate bone loss from gum disease.
In the teeth.
Around the teeth, if they're, of course, kept clean.
Anytime you improve the circulation in your body, so that the blood circulates better and you get the blood going where it should be, it'll help any tissue, and certainly in the mouth it would too. Okay. Exercise also, what was I going to say, helps you to absorb and utilize the calcium in your body better. Mm-hmm.
What about those machines that are really popular now that you stand on and they shake?
Balance. Just be careful. If you're young and so on, you can probably do those things, no problems. If you get older, you don't want to fall off one of those and break something. But they are for balance. And there's a lot of exercises you can do. You might Google on the... It's a way to... Uh-huh. Yeah, if you do that, have somebody close by that can catch you if you start to topple over.
Yeah.
I've tried them.
Okay, one right here.
And they're not as easy as they look.
But I mean, as far as health-wise,
It's good for balance. Mm-hmm, sure. Just be careful you don't get hurt on them.
I'd like to know how sunlight through a window or a sunroof affects your body.
How the sunlight affects it?
Can you get vitamin
Vitamin D through sunlight through a window.
Oh, through a window.
Like people that work in front of a window all day.
Sure.
What benefit do they receive from the light going through the window?
Yeah, sunlight always has some benefit, even if it's coming through a window. Depends on the kind of window it is. Some windows are made so that they block the kind of rays that make the vitamin D in your body. Other windows that aren't so fancy probably work better. But it does that for your body. It also, in your room, it helps to purify it. Studies show that if you get a lot of sunlight in your room, you have much lower levels of pathogens and germs in your surroundings than if it's a dark room where you hardly ever get sunshine in. So sun is very important for our health. When it shines on your skin, it actually takes cholesterol in your skin and converts it to vitamin D. Isn't that interesting? So you need some cholesterol.
So it'll reduce your cholesterol?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. It probably doesn't reduce it much.
Okay.
It doesn't take very much.
All right, I think we'll probably do it. Now, we've got a book to give away tonight, Staying Healthy for Life, which is a little bit of what he did. And we were thinking about how is it that we could give, how would we make this giveaway? I'm going to say, if you have the ability to show me how many steps you have today, let's give it to the person with the highest number of steps. So I looked at mine, and I am at 9,306 steps. Anybody above that? I have 9,600. What do you have? 9,300. Oh, well, that's pretty good. But see, mine's not going to count anyway. 200, 300. Anybody else? What's that? 9,000? 11,000. Anybody going to challenge her? All right, then you get the book. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much for coming. I'm guessing that you'll have a minute or two if there's somebody you want to ask him questions. But let's just close with a word of prayer, and then we'll call it a night. Lord, thank you for the health that we can enjoy and that you designed for us. And we learned tonight the benefits of moving and exercising. And I just pray that you will inspire us to move and to get the health benefits that you have put in place for us. Give us a good evening now and a good night's rest, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, we'll see you all tomorrow. And if you have a friend that's interested in health, invite them to come with you, somebody from the community. And they'll gain some information that might be helpful for their life too. See you all tomorrow.
So tomorrow, it's the 10 things that you can do to, what was it again?
Well, the key things that make a significant difference in how long you live.
Okay, yeah, the 10 things that make it
All
how long.
related to longevity.
Starts at 11, and we have a little service before that, and then at about 11:30, probably about when you'll be speaking.
Okay.
Yeah, good. So we invite you all.
And then in the afternoon about 1:30.
And then 1:30 in the afternoon, you're going to talk about nutrition.
That's the 10,
For those,
10 nutritional principles for a longer life,
yeah,
based on research.
that's it. Yeah, and then there'll be lunch provided as well, so you can stay for the 11 and the 1:30. Thank you. Have a good night.
Oh.